This is Robert Littal from BlackSportsOnline.com, and I am here with the Executive Vice President and General Manager of Showtime Sports, my good Twitter friend, Steven Espinoza. We're here in Las Vegas for the Canelo Alvarez-Alfredo Angulo fight, and he's going to take a little bit of time to speak with us. We really appreciate it. We know that you're very busy and everything, but I want to get right to it. This is a very important fight for Canelo, coming off the Mayweather loss. A lot of the other fighters that have lost to Mayweather before, they've kind of went, downhill from that. What do you think is different a little bit about Canelo, and how do you think he's going to bounce back?
For such a young fighter, Canelo Alvarez is very, very experienced. He's seen a lot. Once you've had 40-something odd fights at 23 years of age, you're pretty experienced. So it is his first loss. He did say it affected him greatly, but I expect to see a more motivated, more hungry, a refreshed Canelo Alvarez. I think he's going to take it as a positive and bounce back and take it as a learning experience, having lost to the best fighter of his generation.
Now, and Angulo is a totally different fighter than Floyd Mayweather. He's going from a technical guy, one of the best ever, and he's getting in there with a guy that we know is going to throw a lot of punches, is going to come forward, is going to take his best defense is offense. How do you think that change and switch, mentality from being in a mental fight to now more of a war? How do you think he's going to handle that?
Mayweather and Angulo couldn't have been more different. You've got one guy who's all skills and all timing and really is a surgeon in the ring. And we come to Angulo, who's really never been accused of being an artist or a super skilled guy in the ring. What he brings is brute force. And honestly, Angulo is probably the hardest puncher that Canelo has ever faced. That's really the question here. As much as is he going to bounce back well from losing to Mayweather, it's how will Canelo take the punches of a guy who punches as hard as Angulo, who he's never faced before. He's never seen this kind of power in his career.
Now, Angulo put down Laura twice. Laura took apart Austin Trout. Austin Trout and Canelo had a very good fight. So this is a dangerous fight. And I think a lot of people think Angulo is a live dog, so to speak. I saw you on Twitter and someone was like, oh, you're going to be upset if Angulo wins. But in your mind, does he have a legitimate shot?
Very legitimate, very legitimate. And I think if you've seen the odds, they're trending in Angulo's favor the last 48 hours. So there are a lot of people with that sentiment. Anytime you've got a punch the way Angulo has, you've got a shot at winning just about any fight. We saw him come in against one of the most skilled boxers in the world in Arizona Lara. Knock him down twice. The first two times in Lara's career he's been down. And no one really saw that coming. So he has proven that you can't really run from this guy. You're going to have to stand and trade for him at some point. And I really expect this to be really a stand in the middle of the ring and trade. You've got two proud Mexican fighters, a great tradition of Mexican, wars. Barrera Morales, is the most obvious example. I think this might turn into one of those, like one of those historic trilogies where the guys just put it on the line every single time.
Now, from a business perspective, this is Canelo's first pay-per-view. You have Mayweather that's kind of on the top of the chain, but you have Canelo that's, coming up and can be seen as kind of a flag bearer, for the new generation. He's still a young guy, like you said. What are your expectations? The promotion has been great, but now that we're a day away, what are your expectations? What do you think the fans, what are you hearing, from the cable operators? What do you think is going to happen, business-wise, pay-per-view-wise with this event?
This is an interesting sort of test case. If this was the NBA, I'd call this a heat check. Because we're out there, saying, is he ready to be a pay-per-view main event star? We have no doubts about the popularity and the fan base that Canelo has established. The question is, when do you transition him to pay-per-view? There's no science to it. There's no real artistry to figuring out when to do it. It's just at some point you make the plunge. He wanted to make the plunge now. He was willing to take the risk, and it's a no-lose situation. If he does well, then great for everybody, and I know we'll get a good fight. If he doesn't do up to, what we'd like, then he'll be back on Showtime, sometime this summer. So either way, really, like I said, it's really a heat check to see where he is in terms of that element of his career.
Now, one of the things I've seen with Showtime and Golden Boy is embracing social media. embracing. I see the fighters all the time talking between each other on Twitter, and of course, you reach out to fans on Twitter, which is something that a lot of executives, don't do. Do you think that's kind of the reason that Showtime has started to trend higher than some of the competitors now?
Oh, I think it can't hurt. It certainly, I think it's a little bit strange that there isn't more dialogue. I mean, this sport, boxing in particular, probably engenders more dialogue and more discussion, more debate than arguably just about any other sport. It's just the nature of the sport, whether you're talking about mythical matchups or pound for pound lists. And to not have the network participate in that discussion, and not have myself personally, as someone who has a role in making these fights, participate in discussion, I think it's it's a little bit strange, and there's really no reason for it. So I think it is sort of it's a new era in terms of what fans expect from both their television networks, from their athletes, from the promoters, and they expect that dialogue, and I don't see anything wrong with giving it to them.
Now, you have the dialogue with the fans. How do you deal with the different personalities of the boxers? When you see an Amir Khan and a Madonna and an Adrian Broner and a Floyd Mayweather, how do you deal with all these personalities, manage all of these big egos, and it seems they all like you. and in the end, you come up with these great matchups, but how do you personally deal with that?
The reality is they're like any other people. And the reality is they want to be treated as human beings, not as assets, not as fighters, not as guys that you plug into fights. All of them are putting their lives on the line to one extent or another, to participate in this sport. And that deserves respect in itself. So whether it's a superstar or it's an opponent or it's a guy with 10 fights, realizing that these are guys that are putting their lives on the line and want to be respected for who they are as people, for their value as human beings and not just fighters, and not just tossed away casually after one loss or two. It's the same thing that I think any other athlete wants.
Now, do you believe with all of these great promotions and these great fighters, Canelo, Floyd Mayweather, all of these, Danny Garcia, do you feel that the pressure from the fans and everybody else to kind of thaw those relationships with others, Top Rank, Bob Arrow, HBO, do you see a little bit of thawing now, a little more communication going?
Well, I think there's certainly momentum because we had a tremendous year in 2013. But there are still some fights out there that should be made. The casual fan and the hardcore fan still wants to see Mayweather-Pacquiao, despite what's happened to Pacquiao in the last few fights. And I think I would not be doing my job if I didn't, continue to pursue it. Realistically, there are challenges there, or challenges in other fights. So it's something that we have to pursue. Sometimes we're successful in making fights that no one expected, like Garcia-Matisse. And sometimes we're not, but we're always going to try to make the best fight, regardless of of disputes or promotional battles or different loyalties.
And finally, how do you see Canelo versus Angulo going? And do you have a prediction?
Well, what I predict is entertainment, because I think this is the kind of card, this is the kind of event that I would invite my casual boxing fans or non-boxing fans to come attend and to come see, because I know one thing. This fight is going to be entertaining top to bottom. We really stack the card with guys who are toe-to-toe action fighters, and there's not going to be a dull moment. I mean, that's why we lost, a fight to injury and fight to another situation, but we just moved up some really exciting fighters, some guys who have been main events in the past. So this is one, if you're trying to convince someone to become a boxing fan or become interested in boxing, this is the event to have them watch.
Well, we definitely appreciate you, and thank you for taking out the time. Look forward to the fights tomorrow.
And anytime. And then, we've got another big show next week, March 15th, with Danny Garcia in Puerto Rico. Danny is somebody who, is probably on the Mayweather radar as well in the long run. And this is a big step for him returning to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, we definitely
look forward to that one as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
all right,
Steve.
thank you, Albert.